Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard is likely going to miss the rest of spring practice after he underwent another ankle surgery. So, should Irish fans be worried, or could this be a blessing in disguise? That's coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Tuesday, March 26th. And thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And you can find this show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, this is your reminder to please like the video below by giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please take a second to rate, review, and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire could feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. We got some big news over the weekend, and not particularly good news. Marcus Freeman announced in a press conference that quarterback Riley Leonard will be out for at least the next few weeks after he underwent a second surgical procedure on his ankle this past Friday. And even though we're still months away from the start of the regular season, I think this is a really tough break for Riley Leonard and Notre Dame in the short term, but it could have potentially an even bigger impact in the long term, depending on how things play out. So I'm going to spend the bulk of today's episode looking at the situation from all of those different angles, and then I got some other news and notes at the end. But let's begin with what we know about Riley Leonard in this surgery. So according to Marcus Freeman, Leonard had surgery on a stress fracture this past Friday. Here's the full quote from Freeman. The surgery was to exchange the current plate in his ankle with a new one. The doctors thought it went extremely well. The overall prognosis and health of his ankle is excellent, end quote. Now, I'm not a doctor, but when I heard they had to replace the plate that they put in his ankle just 2 months ago with the new one, I feel like that's probably not a good thing, despite Freeman's optimism. Again, it might be one of those things that just sounds worse than it actually is. But that being said, I don't want to overreact to this news because I remember when we first heard about the first procedure that Leonard had back in January, it didn't keep him out nearly as long as it was initially reported. So let's take Freeman at his word here. Leonard is definitely going to sit out these next few weeks. He might come back for the end of spring practice and potentially the spring game on April 20th. But my guess is that they're going to continue to be very cautious with him, and he will likely be out for the rest of spring practice. I just don't really think it's worth it, even if he is feeling good, to risk him potentially suffering another injury or another setback at the very end of spring practice when he's already missing the bulk of it. Anyway, so look, it's a really tough break for Leonard, and I think it's definitely going to affect Notre Dame in the short term. I know that some people have kind of spun it as a positive, and I don't really see it that way, and let me just explain why. First of all, Riley Leonard is the starting quarterback for Notre Dame, and it's never a good thing for your starting quarterback to go down ever. Like, I know that Freeman has to say that it's a competition, but it's not. We all know that Riley Leonard is going to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, and I will actually say that Freeman has been slightly more forward about it this year, about the lack of a legitimate competition. Like, he was on Greg McElroy's podcast recently, and I think McElroy asked Freeman about Leonard being the starting quarterback, and let's just say Freeman didn't really go out of his way to correct him. He sort of just treated his response like what we all know, that Leonard is going to be the starting quarterback for Notre Dame this year. That's why they went out and they paid him a significant amount to get him when he was in the transfer portal. But it's especially bad when you consider the fact that Leonard has only been around for about 3 months, and he needs to develop chemistry with his wide receivers, with his tight ends, and he also has to set up some chemistry with the offensive line. Not to mention the fact that he also has to learn a brand new offense under Mike Denbrock. And even though he can sit in the classroom and he can learn, he can watch film, he can be out there on the practice field in shorts and a t-shirt, it's just not the same as being out there and being able to run it with your teammates. You need the amount of reps out there. You need to be able to, first of all, kind of solidify yourself as a leader when you're the quarterback of the offense and probably one of the leaders of the entire team. So even though it's only 15 practices, they are extremely important to the development of this team, especially when you're installing a new offense and you're bringing in a new quarterback who's only a one-year rental with guys who he hasn't really been able to throw to. It actually made me think about spring practice last year and how that really panned out for Notre Dame with the quarterback situation back then. So at the start of spring practice, Tyler Buchner had a leg up on Sam Hartman at the start. And I remember reading those early practice reports and that Buchner was actually outplaying Sam Hartman for at least the first half of those sessions while Hartman was still learning the system and becoming acclimated with his new targets. But then by the time the Jersey scrimmage came around, which in my opinion is actually more important than the spring game because the Jersey scrimmage is more geared towards the guys who will get the bulk of the reps in the fall. I mean, I love the spring game. It's fun, but it's really like a glorified scrimmage, and a lot of it is just the backups and the walk-ons. And I'm excited for those guys to get the opportunity to play in Notre Dame Stadium, but I feel like the Jersey scrimmage is a lot more conducive to, the starting offense and the competition. It more closely resembles a game in the fall, even though it's not a traditional game in the sense that the spring game is. And that is the day when Sam Hartman really started to click as the leader of the offense, the starting quarterback, all of that. And he pretty much completely seized control of the quarterback competition when he went out and dominated the spring game. Like, you started to really hear, oh, like that's the Sam Hartman that we thought we were getting in the Jersey scrimmage. And then after the spring game, there was like literally no doubt that Sam Hartman was a better quarterback than Tyler Buchner. And, say what you will about the Sam Hartman experience. I know some people feel a little bit strongly that they were more disappointed in him than others. I get it. I feel like we were all a little bit responsible for putting otherworldly expectations on Hartman and what he could do for Notre Dame in his lone season as the starting quarterback. But one thing that I will not hear, there is no argument to be made that Tyler Buchner was ever a better option than Sam Hartman. But the fact that Tyler Buchner sort of had that leg up at the beginning shows you that Sam Hartman had a long way to go before he could really be himself and become comfortable being the starting quarterback. And I think that's what Riley Leonard is dealing with right now. So he is not going to have that time. He's not going to have those practices to really make up for that, which means his progress and his development as the starting quarterback for Notre Dame is going to be delayed. That's not a good thing for Notre Dame. You also have to consider the fact that a lot of what makes Riley Leonard such a great quarterback is his ability to use his legs. He's a very fast runner. He's a very good athlete. He's very elusive. He's mobile. We know all of that, and that is why he was so appealing to Notre Dame when they went out and got him in the transfer portal. So if he's already dealing with complications from a surgery he had a couple months ago, then who's to say that those sort of lingering issues won't continue after this surgery? And even if this surgery and the ensuing rest period is exactly what Riley needs to get back to full strength, I just feel like his ankle is probably going to be a little bit more susceptible to getting injured again in the fall or in the future, like whenever the case may be. It's too early to tell on that front. I'm not going to say definitively that, what's going to happen to his ankle after this surgery because, again, I'm not qualified to do so. But I feel like it's important to ask these sorts of questions because I don't think anybody anticipated that Leonard would need a cleanup surgery to clean up the previous cleanup surgery, but that's where we're at right now with Riley Leonard in the Notre Dame quarterback situation. So now Notre Dame's starting quarterback, their prized acquisition in the transfer portal, isn't going to get live reps with his receivers and the rest of the offense, most likely until the end of July or the early part of August, whenever Notre Dame decides to start fall camp this year. I feel like last year they started at the end of July, but that might have had to do with the fact that they were going to Ireland that year. So I think they're probably going to start a little bit later. Either way, it's going to be a while before Riley Leonard is able to get those kind of reps again. And even though he's still going to have plenty of opportunities in the summer to throw to his guys on air, I just feel like those reps and those practices are extremely valuable, and that's why Notre Dame's coaching staff spreads them out so that they can get more time to watch film and evaluate every single practice. Like, those are very, very valuable, and there's a reason why we spend so much time talking about it on this podcast and other podcasts and all that, because this stuff matters. And even if Riley Leonard is able to recover well from this surgery, I think there's going to be lingering questions about his ankle pretty much the rest of the year. Like, whenever Leonard gets hit, which is going to happen pretty often, given how much he runs the ball. And I think we're all just going to be holding our breath sometimes when he gets up, because we're always going to be worried about his ankle. And for better or worse, he has a history now. I don't like saying guys are injury prone to all injuries just because they had dealt with some in the past, but I think that some injuries make you more vulnerable to getting re-injured to that specific part of your body, and I think that's going to be the case with Leonard and his ankle. I don't want to sound too pessimistic because, again, like I totally realize there's a chance that Leonard bounces back from this. He has a good summer, spends time with the receivers, getting work in on their own, but I also don't want to spin this into a false positive because I think these practices are so valuable and missing them is just not good, especially for a guy in Riley Leonard's situation. Marcus Freeman even said it at the end of his press conference. Like, having a quarterback competition is great, but at some point you need continuity between a quarterback and the offensive line. And I would have wanted for that process to get started now because, like I said, we all know who the starting quarterback is going to be for Notre Dame in the fall. The unfortunate irony in all of this, of course, is that this all started when Riley Leonard got hurt on the final drive against Notre Dame when he was the quarterback at Duke. Obviously, it was incredibly unfortunate to see Leonard get hurt on the play. You never want to see that, but I remember how excited I was just in the moment seeing Notre Dame recover the fumble, not realizing that Leonard had gotten hurt, and how great of a moment that was for Notre Dame and that team last season as the Irish were able to pick up a huge comeback win, seal the deal there, and it basically saved their season, or at least it felt like it did at the time. Just imagine if I told you back then, like that one play could end up seriously impacting what Notre Dame would do the following season. It would have been pretty hard to fathom in the moment, but that's sort of the state of things right now for the Irish and for Riley Leonard again. I don't want to overreact. I just think that this is a really tough setback for Leonard and the development of the Notre Dame offense right now. It could lead to some problems at the beginning of the season, or maybe Denbrock and the offense just get it all figured out in the fall. And I just think it's going to be a really interesting storyline to follow throughout the rest of this offseason. Riley Leonard's health is going to be a big topic of discussion, and I think it's going to be the storyline of this season, really, depending on how things all play out. But that's the bad news, okay? Good news is Leonard's injury could lead to some positive news in the future about the rest of the Notre Dame quarterbacks that's coming up next. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The North Carolina Tar Heels can only be described as an armada. The one seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they secured a spot in the Sweet 16 this Thursday against Alabama in the NCAA tournament. The Tar Heels look poised to make a run for the championship. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. For as much as Riley Leonard injury sucks for him and his development, I think it does provide a great opportunity for Steve Angeli. It happens all the time in life, right? Like a bad thing happens, but it leads to a good thing that probably would not have happened if not for the bad thing. This actually happened to me recently. I ordered Chipotle on DoorDash, and the guy just disappeared with my order. I think he just ate it for himself. I never really heard back from him. He started driving aimlessly, and I was like, what the hell went on? And then all of a sudden the order was canceled. So I was pissed off at the time because it was late and I was starving. So I was basically forced into trying a sushi place that is close to my house that I just haven't gotten to trying yet, and ended up being awesome. So I was able to get a refund for my initial order, and now I know of a great food spot that's close by that I'm not sure I ever would have tried if not for the DoorDash guy deciding, hey, this burrito looks pretty good. Why don't I just eat it? In the case of Notre Dame, I think there is a chance that Riley Leonard's injury could impact whether or not Steve Angeli sticks around for this season, and obviously it would be a good thing for Notre Dame, a really good thing, if Steve Angeli did decide to stay. At the very least, I think the circumstances around Angeli's decision have changed significantly. He's still dealing with an uphill battle, right? Like, I still think Riley Leonard is destined to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. But now Angeli gets to get the bulk of the reps with the starters. He's going to have a great chance to prove himself to the Notre Dame coaching staff because this is the first time in his career that he is going to be getting all of the reps with the starters. Like, he's always been sort of sharing time, even after Sam Hartman decided to opt out of the bowl game. Like, that's just a couple weeks where he's the starter there, and it was the end of the season. It doesn't really feel the same, whereas now he's the top guy in that room, and Marcus Freeman even said as much in his press conference. He's still going to have to make a decision once spring ball is over. Like, does he want to stick around at Notre Dame and be the backup, or does he want to enter the transfer portal and start at a lesser program? That's still in play, but I think now the likelihood of him seeing the field this season, if he were to stay at Notre Dame, has gone up. Like I said earlier, Leonard has an injury history now. He's going to run the ball, and he's going to get hit more than the average quarterback, so there is a decent chance that Leonard gets hurt again and has to miss at least some time this year. If that happens, Angeli can come in and be the starter. Now, you never want to root for a guy's injury, but you also have to be realistic about the situation and say, hey, Notre Dame needs to have a good backup quarterback this year because they are going to run their quarterback, and he is going to be more likely to get hurt than the average guy. So they need to plan in case that happens. Also, if you're Angeli, you have 1 year left before you earn your degree from Notre Dame. And if he doesn't win the job after next season, if he decides to stick around, he can transfer with his degree, and he'll still have 2 years of eligibility remaining and potentially more tape in real games as the quarterback for Notre Dame, which could lead to a better destination for him if he were to decide to transfer next year. To me, I think that means he's a little bit more likely to stay at Notre Dame than he was before. Notre Dame certainly has a better case to try and keep him than they did before this injury. And again, there is a chance that Steve Angeli plays well in the spring, realizes it's still not good enough for him to start, and he doesn't want to wait around and see if Leonard gets hurt again, and he could still transfer out. Like, I'm not saying that, oh, well, now Steve Angeli is definitely going to stay, but I still think the opportunity for him to leave is still on the table, but I think the odds of him staying are a little bit higher now than they were before because he's going to get these reps, and I think that he's going to be realistic about the situation and say, wow, like, if I were to come back, yes, I'm probably going to be the backup, but there is a decent chance that I'm going to play this year. But I also think it impacts Kenny Minchey as well because on one hand, Kenny Minchey is probably going to get a lot more reps with the starters than he ever would have if Riley Leonard would have been around for the entirety of spring practice. He's going to be treated like the backup now for the rest of spring ball, again, assuming that Riley Leonard doesn't come back, which I don't think he will this spring. But I think that's going to be good for Kenny Minchey, and I think it's going to be good for his confidence and his development. I think it's going to expedite it a little bit because before that, he was just going to be going with the backups, and the scout team was the third-string quarterback, and he'd have to share some of those reps with C.J. Carr, the early enrollee freshman. So I don't really think that Minchey would have gotten many opportunities with the ones prior to this. So now he's going to get a chance to show what he can do with the better players on the roster. On the other hand, for Kenny Minchey, if Angeli decides to stay after spring ball because he sees an opportunity to get some playing time for Notre Dame this fall, well, then what does that mean for Kenny Minchey? Does he want to stick around another year as the third-string quarterback? Because I've always felt that one of Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchey is probably going to transfer to the spring, and it's going to be dependent on what Angeli decides to do. I still believe that's the case. I've been vocal about the fact that I think Steve Angeli is probably going to transfer. I said that before spring practice started, and like I said, I'm starting to reconsider after these recent developments, and there might be a chance that he stays. So if he decides to stay, if you're Minchey, you're like, okay, I know I'm a capable quarterback. I'm going to be the third string this year. Next year, you're going to be in a quarterback competition with Angeli, who is currently above you on the depth chart, and you've got this really talented true freshman there as well. So the situation has changed for Kenny Minchey in a slightly different way. Like, this is the problem, and again, this is, I say problem in quotes really, with having 4 quality quarterbacks in your room because there's only one guy out there on the field at the quarterback position. And if you're the third or fourth guy and you know you are good enough to play at this level, you're probably going to look elsewhere if there's really not a clear path for playing time for you this year or potentially next year as well. At this point, I'm really not sure what's going to happen. Even if the surgery itself isn't that significant to Leonard and his long-term growth as the quarterback for Notre Dame, I just think these next few weeks of practices are so crucial for all of the top quarterbacks on the roster, especially the 2 that are going to have a decision to make on April 15th once the transfer portal opens up, because I don't think Riley Leonard's going to transfer, and I don't think CJ Carr is going to transfer. So it's really going to come down to what Steve Ancelli and or Kenny Minchey decide to do. And now everything has changed now with Riley Leonard being out. And, maybe in the end it won't end up having as big of an impact on the future of this room as I think it will now. Maybe it will all play out the same, like if Leonard did not undergo a second surgery. But I feel like the process to getting to those decisions has certainly changed, and I'm very interested to see how it plays out. Okay, we're going to wrap up today's show with some more news and notes from the weekend, including some positive news about the tight ends. Today's episode is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why I have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Speaking from my own experience, I know that whenever we're looking to make a new hire, we use LinkedIn to help find the perfect new team member, and it's so easy because they do the heavy lifting. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why owners rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So when I was doing the mailbag last week, I was asked about Eli Raridon's health and really whether or not Notre Dame should pursue a tight end in the transfer portal after it was reported that Eli Raridon was not a full participant in Notre Dame spring practice so far. He was suited up, he was with the team, but sometimes he would sort of stand to the side during Notre Dame position drills. And I thought, that's definitely an interesting storyline given the fact that Eli Raridon has suffered 2 ACL surgeries on the same knee. I think we all, as Notre Dame fans, have really high hopes for what Eli Raridon could do for Notre Dame. He's got the physical tools. He's got everything you want to be like a future NFL tight end and be the next great in a long line of great tight ends to come through Notre Dame. But can't really do that if you're not on the field. So it was definitely cause for concern when he was not a full participant in spring practice, but Marcus Freeman provided some clarity on the situation over the weekend. He said that he is being monitored closely. They're really keeping an eye on Eli Raridon, and that they're keeping him out mostly for precautionary reasons more than anything. It didn't seem like he had suffered a significant setback, which is obviously much better than hearing that he suffered a new injury. It's not ideal. I feel like the fact that they're being this cautionary is still not great because maybe he's dealing with some soreness or whatever, but it definitely could be worse. So I thought this was really good to hear. However, it doesn't really change my stance about whether Notre Dame should look to add a tight end in the transfer portal. I think that they should at least look. They shouldn't just take any guy just to add a piece. I think they should look for the right guy, preferably a veteran who has some experience, is a good blocker, and who could just provide some stability to that room, because even though it's loaded with talent, it's also loaded with an unfortunate past of injuries. Mitchell Evans is recovering from a torn ACL. Like I said, Eli Raridon's had 2. Kevin Bauman has had his history with injuries. And now you got Jack Larson, who's a true freshman, who I think is really talented, but he's also a true freshman, and it's really tough for him. It's going to be tough for him to get on the field, especially considering the fact that he doesn't really have like the ideal size that you want for a tight end, at least right now. He's still got some time to bulk up and all that. So I thought it was interesting that they're keeping him out, but I feel a little bit better about his prognosis than what I had thought last week. Also on the injury front, we found out that Deion Colsey, the wide receiver, is going to be out with a dislocated finger, which is also going to require surgery. Again, it's minor, but I think it's going to keep him out for a few weeks of spring practice. It's definitely a bummer for him. I feel like a finger injury is so just annoying to deal with. Like, I broke a finger before, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's not like breaking an arm or a leg where you're like, oh, wow, you kind of get a bunch of sympathy, and you're like, all right, that's a serious injury. We're not going to ask you to do the same things that you normally would do. Obviously, you can still get a lot done with a broken finger, but if you're a wide receiver, that's going to hurt, man. So I think he's going to have to sit out, and it's just a tough break for him because, last year he missed most of the season with an injury, and I thought that maybe this spring he could take some strides, get on the field, because he's been passed up by a lot of younger guys, but it looks like he's going to be out for a few weeks. But we got some good news. Marcus Freeman raved about the early enrollee freshman, Bryce Young. And Freeman said that he's impressed the most out of all the early enrollees, which is a little bit of a surprise because I think the early favorite to be the most impressive early enrollee was Kingston Viliamu-Asa. And that's not to say that he hasn't been a good player so far for Notre Dame, but the fact that Bryce Young is already one of those top guys that Freeman is talking about is, one, really impressive, and two, it's just still kind of difficult for me to wrap my head around. Like, obviously, he is the son of a Hall of Famer and a Notre Dame legend, so I guess we shouldn't be too surprised that he ended up being a good football player as well. But you just think about what the perception of Bryce Young was when he committed to Notre Dame. He was looked at as this like raw, just physically gifted athlete because he was so tall and had so much length. But now it looks like he's really coming to his own. He had a phenomenal senior year of high school, skyrocketed up the recruiting ranks, and now he could be pushing for playing time as a true freshman on a defensive line that features all four are grad students, including R.J. Oben, who's a sixth year, and the rest are fifth-year seniors. So the fact that he's even got a chance to crack the rotation on Saturdays in the fall is just really, really impressive and just a meteoric rise for the young defensive end. I'm really excited about his future at Notre Dame. Another bit of positive news. Freeman said that young safeties Adon Schuler and Luke Talich have been very impressive so far running out there beside Xavier Watts. I still think Rod Hurd is going to be the starter. As a matter of fact, I feel very confident in saying that Rod Hurd is going to be the starter once he's able to join the team full-time this summer, once he's officially graduated from Northwestern and he's eligible to participate in Notre Dame practice. He won't be able to do practice until fall camp, but he can still participate in workouts and things like that. He's just so experienced, and he's also a really good player for Northwestern. I feel like sometimes it's kind of forgotten because he played at Northwestern, and maybe people just, they're a little scarred from the Brandon Joseph situation. But I think that Hurd is actually a more proven player than Joseph was when he entered Notre Dame. But the depth at the safety position has been a concern for years for Notre Dame now, and it looks like Notre Dame might finally be taking a significant step forward in that department because, as I've said before on this podcast, like Notre Dame is going to run a third safety out there a lot. They need a guy who they can trust to come in for Xavier Watts and Rod Hurd, and sometimes they like to run in that three safety set. So that is an important position, maybe not as important as like the nickel, but it's still something that Notre Dame is going to use, and the fact that Adon Schuler and Luke Talich are stepping up is really encouraging. Plus, they're young. This year would be a great year for them to learn as a rotational piece until next year, once Watts is presumably gone and Hurd is gone as well. You're going to need those guys to step up once they're playing more significant roles, and it's great for them to get that experience this year. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Remember, subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever listening to the podcast, and give us a follow on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish. Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod. My personal X account is at Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you tomorrow.